There's no way that this happened to the Rams. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramily, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your Los Angeles Rams. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, do us a huge favor, join the party, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and if you want to support every single episode, hit that like button and drop a comment down below. Podcast listeners, write us a review. We'll read on the show. My name is Doug McCain. Friends call me DMAC. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. I've covered LA sports for over a decade, 24/7 Sports, Bleacher Report, SI, Dodgers Nation. I also do NFL radio for Westwood One. Today I'm flying solo, the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers. He's on vacation this week. He'll be back next week. But we've got a jam-packed show. The Rams' 53-man roster is set. I've got all of these surprises on that finalized 53-man. Also, what happened with Willie Lampkin? What happened with Pooh? That's coming up next. But first, today's episode of Locked On Rams is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. Okay, Ramily. We've got a lot of news to get into, so let's get right into it. And the biggest story right now is about Willie Lampkin IV. He was the early standout for the Rams. He was fantastic in their first game against the Cowboys in the preseason at a PFF grade of 94. You had people saying he was the steal, the gem, the next guy that they had found in the diamond in the rough. Rams player development, scouting, and it was all this excitement about him. But let's get you caught up on what led to him being a Philadelphia Eagle. He is no longer in the Rams organization. So the Rams made their final cuts on Tuesday, and the Rams, they ultimately made the decision to, instead of outright waiving Willie Lampkin, like they did the other 32 players that they waived, they cut him with an injury designation. So Willie Lampkin, in the Rams' second preseason game against the Chargers, he had an ankle injury, a knee injury, and Sean McVay said at the time that he was going to be out for a couple of weeks. And it was bad timing for Lampkin, who was one of the standouts that showed a lot of promise. And the Rams, they didn't keep on the 53-man roster. Instead, like I said, they used that waived injury designation on him. They also did it with Sean Jolly. And that way, it was so the Rams could find a way to keep him in their organization. But one thing had to happen, and that was he had to clear waivers. So if no team claimed him on the waiver wire today, well, he could then go back to the Rams injured reserve list. But if he went unclaimed as well, he and the Rams, they could have agreed to an injury settlement. And if that was the case, then Willie Lampkin, he could find some type of deal with the team for a couple of weeks, and that could be a part of his base salary, right? So basically, it would have given him some options. If they reached an injury settlement, Lampkin would become a free agent, and he could sign with any team. If there was no settlement, he could go on the IR and miss the rest of the season. So the team would have had 5 days to reach an injury settlement with Lampkin. And the injury, from what I have heard and when I was told, that it was bad enough that it could have kept him out the entire season. So unless they got a different report from different doctors or second opinions, that it looked like that this was something that was going to keep him out for the entire year. So if he thinks that, if he thought that, okay, I can help another team, but the Rams don't believe that, he could have gone the route of, okay, at least I'll reach an injury settlement and I'll sign to a team as a free agent. But if he wanted to stay with the Rams and no team claimed him, he could just gone to the IR and he would pass on that settlement. He would still remain in this organization. But then something that was pretty surprising happened, and that was that Willie Lampkin was claimed by the Eagles. And yes, the Eagles are the last team that was up on the waiver wire, the 32nd team, because they are the reigning Super Bowl champions. That is what happened with him. And look, it was one thing for this organization to just waive him, but you get the star early on for the training camp, for preseason, an undrafted offensive lineman. He signs with the reigning Super Bowl champions and the reigning NFC champions in a team that you're competing with in this league for not just this year, for the foreseeable future. I think those are the two best run organizations in the NFC. And Lampkin, he's going to be on the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the only thing the Rams could have done differently is you could have placed him on the IR. And if you had done that, that could have gotten interesting because the spots are limited and it would have been kind of tough. But still, this is not good for the Rams. I mean, it's not that big of a deal as far as like the current team, but it is a surprise because typically what happens in these situations is teams kind of honor that as far as, oh, you're on the IR. We kind of know how it is. It's almost like an unwritten rule in the NFL that teams don't claim waived or injured players. It's a sign of respect. It just happens. And there were 31 teams in this league that said, okay, we are not going to claim Willie Lampkin from the Rams, but the Eagles decide not to. Howie Roseman, hey, he claimed him. So we'll see. I mean, we know that Jason Kelce, he's retired, and Jason Kelce was not a gigantic. Then he was 6'3", but yeah, we'll see what happens with Willie Lampkin. And then, yeah, it's not fun. It's, I mean, this team is fine right now for sure, but it's just a little shocking because you just don't see this happen that often. I have to believe that the Rams had a very strong indication about his health. He was always going to be an uphill climb as far as he was a undersized player at that position. I mean, spending an IR spot on him would have been a pretty tough capital, but you got limited spots there. But Willie Lampkin, he is an Eagle. Now, the next one we got to talk about is Chris Paul Jr. Chris Pooh Paul was waived. And a lot of Rams were pretty upset about that. We know that that is a position where they have struggled. That's a position where you wanted an influx of talent. And Chris Paul, by every indication, was a guy that they're invested. I mean, they traded up for him. They traded up in the 5th round back in April to get him, and he gets cut. And like we talked about at yesterday's show, that was the rumor. That's what we had heard, and that's what people were saying, and that's what happened. So he not only got cut, but the surprising thing on top of that is he did not get claimed by any other team off of waivers. There were none of the other 31 teams wanted to take a flyer on Chris Paul and add him to their 53-man roster. So not only that, which came as a surprise, I think a lot of people thought he was going to get claimed. He didn't get claimed, right? So for whatever reason, he did not get claimed. Teams didn't like him enough to throw him on there, but you would expect that possibly he would be back with the Rams. But after he cleared waivers, he became a free agent. And a lot of times we see in this league when a player is moved off of and they cut him and that he clears waivers, that he'll just go back to the team he was with to join the practice squad. But he ended up signing with the Seattle Seahawks practice squad instead of going back to the Rams. So, couple things in play here. One, either the Rams didn't offer him a spot, or two, he did not want to return to the Rams. Could have been both. But, hey, it's still surprising because this is a guy that they were very excited about internally. They thought that they had gotten a lot of value out of him, a guy that you could trade up for and get a guy who they felt could be a long-term solution if everything broke the right way. But it did not happen with Chris Pooh Paul. He is not on the Rams anymore. He took his Winnie the Pooh chain, and it's in Seattle, which is in the same division. So I think you look at kind of where he's at as a player. I mean, they also traded away the Rams also traded away Ernest Jones for pennies, right? I mean, they're they don't strongly prioritize that position on this team. And we were saying a couple months ago he's going to be the next favorite linebacker for the Rams, but things just did not work out. So some surprises. We'll break down the 53-man roster a little more in the next segment. But Willie Lampkin is an Eagle. Chris Pooh is a Seahawk. And the Rams, well, you got to trust them. I know that Rams fans are upset. There's got to be something they know that we don't. But we're going to continue to break down more surprises from the Rams 53-man roster. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams. This episode of Locked On Rams brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th was officially FanDuel Futures Day, and of course it was a great day. It was a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel was giving you deals on NFL season predictions, so whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week one even kicks off, this is your moment. And you can still go to FanDuel right now and take a look at all those futures. MVP, Josh Allen at plus 600, the second highest odds. You got the Super Bowl champion, the Rams, a plus 2,000. They have the 10th highest odds to raise that Lombardi trophy. So if I'm a betting man, I'm betting on my Rams. Great stuff. So go to FanDuel, visit the FanDuel app today, and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. And we are off and running here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Also want to give a special shout out to those everyday listeners out there watching and listening to every single episode of Locked On Rams. Cannot thank you enough. This season is almost here. I want to give a special shout out to all those fans, all the members of the Ramley that rock with us all season long, that did not miss an episode, a podcast, a video, whatever it was. The journey of the offseason is almost over, and the season is almost upon us. But we're going to continue to look at this 53-man roster, and we are going to talk about the other surprises, if there are any. Now, the next I want to talk about is you only have 4 edge rushers on the active roster. So that's not an insane surprise, but if you get an injury, it could get thin pretty quickly. You got Jared Verse, Byron Young, Josiah Stewart, and Nick Hampton. So Stewart and Hampton, they don't have a ton of experience. Stewart's a rookie. Hampton has played 76 defensive snaps in 2 seasons. So if Byron Young and Jared Verse stay healthy, this is not going to be that big of an issue. Of course, you need a third edge rusher, and Josiah Stewart is certainly that guy. And he's inexperienced, but we talked about other types of moves that what you could do for that position if you're trying to replace a Michael Hoyt. And they believe in Josiah Stewart. We also talked about Deshaun Johnson, how many snaps that he played in the Rams' final preseason game at that position. But that does not look great for the depth. You're a little top-heavy at that position. But I do think that having that positional flexibility, having Deshaun Johnson as someone that it feels like they want to give some looks at. And just talking to some people, that's certainly something that could be in the cards, and they like his athleticism, what he could potentially bring to that as a guy that can do some outside linebacker type of stuff. So that's an interesting one, and just kind of sticking with that, stay on the defensive side. Let's talk about the linebacker spot, because we know that Troy Reeder, he's on this team for another year, and it's not a massive surprise, right? It's not a huge shocker. This doesn't blow your mind, but it is when you consider that they cut Chris Pooh. Why didn't you bet on the upside in the player development of Chris Pooh when you traded up to get him in the 5th round? Use a 5th round pick that you trade up for to get him, and then you retain Troy Reeder, who he didn't play in the preseason, so that told you that he wasn't going to get released, but there was some feeling, at least, that it was because he had enough experience, but to not play in the preseason for a guy that has done that, I mean, we know that Sean McVay stresses special teams, and the value of special teams is certainly significant, and you got Sean Dolak, so maybe you're just kind of looking at that. I mean, Dolak, he makes the team, and Troy Reeder just kind of is there. Not a guy that's going to be extremely additive, but maybe they just saw something in Chris Paul that led them to believe that he wasn't going to be a part of the future and that they just did not want to go through the development process with him. I'm still searching for answers for that one. If you've watched Troy Reeder, you know that there's not a big upside play there. So that was a surprise, not an incredible surprise, but still, if anyone was, it's a surprise when you connect it with the Chris Paul cut. And then we talked about this one, the already cut fifth rounder Brennan Jackson after just one season. He was a fifth round pick in 2024. So clearly the Rams are saying, hey, we'll give you some late round draft capital. If it doesn't work out, we're not going to be afraid to move on from him. He was cut after just one season. He won't be back because the Raiders did claim him off of waivers. So the Rams, they're not scared to move off dudes. I mean, that's just the truth. So they have their guys. They trust their guys. And if they don't think that you can have that potential with this team, they're not going to think twice, right? They're going to change the code on the building doors like it's a Jamal Adams meme, and they're going to say, okay, hey, pack your stuff. It's time to move on. So that's interesting. Then I want to talk about the defensive line too, because the Rams, you're going 7 deep on that defensive line. And the Rams, one of their big strengths on that side of the football is the depth on the D-line. You keep 7 players along that line. The top 4 guys was always a lock with Kobe Turner, Braden Fisk, Pooh Ford, and Tyler Davis. But in Ty Hamilton, too, I think you could say that he was up there for sure. But you also kept Larrell Murchison. You kept Deshaun Johnson. Those guys weren't locks at the beginning of preseason for sure. They still needed to prove themselves in the joint practices, in the preseason. And Johnson, I think that we saw in the preseason finale that what he could do as a edge rusher, I think, ultimately sealed the deal. So you look at the numbers. Got it right here. I looked it up. He had 11 pressures in 3 games. I mean, that was the high for all defensive players. That was Deshaun Johnson. So give him credit. I mean, guys can win jobs during the preseason and training camp, and Deshaun Johnson, with his production and his positional versatility, he got himself a lock on this roster. So give him a ton of credit. So this is a good roster. We know that. Is it a Super Bowl winning roster? We'll find out. I think the upside certainly is there. If this team wins like we think they will, I don't think we're going to be belly aching too much. If you look at the other players that the Rams lost off of waivers, we already talked about a couple of them. Willie Lampkin gone, but you also got cornerback Darion Kendrick. He's also gone. He's off to Seattle. He was claimed by the Seahawks, and Brennan Jackson, we just discussed, he was claimed by the Las Vegas Raiders. And Charles Woods, he's going to the Patriots. Mike Variable and the gang in New England claimed those dudes. So if they cleared waivers, I do think the Rams would have probably brought those guys back for the practice squad, but they were claimed. They're now a part of their new team's 53-man roster. So the Rams are putting together that practice squad, and that is, of course, you do that after the waiver process is complete. It's 16 spots available for that practice squad. They're going to be all filled up very quickly, and we're going to talk about that and some other waiver wire possibilities. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams. This episode of Locked On Rams and this episode of Locked On Rams is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. The NFL season is right around the corner, and you can feel the buzz. Fantasy football season is here. Everyone's researching, drafting, and building their championship squads. If you haven't joined a league yet, now's the time, and it's all happening on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, I'm playing fantasy football on Yahoo Fantasy. Me and my man Travis, we're going to have Brock. We're going to have Gavin Carlson, the Mob Squad, and you should too. Whether you're a first-time or a veteran creating your millionth league, Yahoo Fantasy is loaded with fun ways to compete and brand new features that make the game even better. With the season kicking off on September 4th, now is the time to start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football, which offers so many fun ways to compete. Want more ways to play? Try the brand new Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine League mode, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated weekly until one team is left standing. Want to play instantly with friends? Try the new Draft with Friends mode. Prefer the classics? Get your crew together and go head-to-head in a private league. No crew, no problem. Join a public league, the easiest way to play. The NFL season kicks off on September 4th, so don't wait. Start your league now. Draft now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Okay, so quickly, let's run down that 53-man roster. And we pretty much nailed it. I don't think that I got one wrong that I can think of from the prediction the other day. It's going through it. And let's start with the running backs. I mean, you got Kyren Williams, Blake Corum, Jarquez Hunter. I said they would take 3 backs, and it wouldn't be Cody Schrader, Ronnie Rivers, and we were right about that. The 6 wide receivers, we got that correctly as well. Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, Tutu Atwell, Jordan Whittington, Kanata Mumfield, and Xavier Smith. Tight ends, got that one. Tyler Higbee, Terrence Ferguson, Colby Parkinson, Davis Allen. The offensive linemen as well, Alaric Jackson, Steve Avila, Coleman Shelton, Kevin Dotson, Rob Havenstein, DJ Humphreys, David Quessenberry, Warren McClendon, Bo Limmer, and Justin Dedich. So 10 offensive linemen, 4 tight ends, 6 wide receivers, 3 running backs. Then we talked about the 7 defensive linemen, Braden Fisk, Kobe Turner, Poona Ford, Ty Hamilton, Tyler Davis, Desjuan Johnson, and Laurel Murchison. And as far as the edge rushers, the Rams have 4, Byron Young, Jared Verse, Josiah Stewart, Nick Hampton. The linebackers, Nate Landman, Omar Spades, Sean Dolak, Troy Reeder. Cornerbacks, Darius Williams, Akella Witherspoon, Emmanuel Forbes, Kobe Durant, and Josh Wallace. So 5 cornerbacks. 4 safeties, Cam Curl, Cameron Kinchins, Jalen McCullough, and the UCLA Bruin, Quinn Lake. Special teams, Josh McCarty, punter Ethan Evans, and long snapper Alex Ward. So, yeah, if you've been watching this show for the last couple of weeks, that has been the 53-man roster that we were rolling with, and that is where you're at. And as far as the waiver claims, the Rams didn't make any waiver claims after they cut down their roster. The Rams had the 26th spot on the waiver claim, and that's where their position was, but they weren't among any of the teams that added any new players. So not a gigantic surprise either, because the Rams, we knew they had a lot of depth up and down this roster and kind of into those spots. So it means they didn't take someone, but they could still sign someone out on the open market if they wanted to. They just didn't use their waiver claim to lock down a player. So it's not a lot of movement now between this period in week 1 where the Rams can add to their roster or to their practice squad, but it's more about who the Rams lost than who they picked up. We kind of didn't think they were going to be that active on it, but just a couple minutes ago, the Rams did release their practice squad. So the Rams announced their 15-player practice squad. They have signed 15 players to the squad after the roster cuts. NFL teams, they have to wait for those players to clear waivers before signing them to a practice squad. So the Rams, they did, of course, lose those players, but 15 spots of those 16 are locked down. You got offensive lineman A.J. R. Curry, offensive lineman Wyatt Bowles, wide receiver True Edwards, cornerback A.J. Green, defensive tackle Jack Heflin, safety Tanner Engel, cornerback Cam Lampkin, offensive lineman Dylan McMahon, outside linebacker Jamil Muhammad, inside linebacker Elias Neal, defensive tackle Bill Norton, wide receiver Brendan Presley. He had a really nice last game, but I don't think that he did enough to take any of the other guys' spots in that wide receiver room. Running back Ronnie Rivers, so he's a veteran. He's someone that is going to do the work, and if his number's called, we know what he brings. Then Cody Schrader, and then safety Nate Valcarcel. So that's your practice squad. Like I said, the big takeaways for that are you didn't see a lot of claims, but you keep A.J. Arcuri as a guy that you can continue to work on. You can develop him. You got Wyatt Bowles. You got Dylan McMahon. Bowles was solid for the Rams during the preseason. He actually led the Rams in preseason snaps. He gave up just 4 pressures, and all 4 of them were against the Browns, and that was going up against the Browns starters. So that's an interesting guy to keep. McMahon, he will be with this team for another year after he was claimed off the waiver wire last year. He's a 6th-round pick from the Eagles. And then, look, you got Brandon Presley. He was definitely a bright spot for the Rams during preseason. Cody Schrader was a bright spot for the Rams during preseason. They stay in the building. So it's not going to be a complete shock if those guys, if there's injuries, they're elevated. Then True Edwards, he had some moments, too, that you felt pretty good about. He had the game-winning catch against the Chargers that sticks out as really the moment of the preseason for the Rams. And on the defensive side, A.J. Green's a veteran, Tanner Engel. I mean, it's a solid group, right? And this is kind of the nitty-gritty of the preseason, but we got to talk about it. And as soon as we learn more about why they moved off of Chris Paul, we'll definitely continue to get into that. I do still like A.J. Curry. I think he really improved his footwork. I think the Rams, they're smart when it comes to developing guys like that in the long-term play. So some it can happen in a month, some it can happen in a year, some it happens in multiple years. And A.J. Curry really is an interesting project, Jack. It really, really is an interesting project. But, yeah, I mean, look, if there's going to be one thing that you're going to take away from this show, I hope it's that, yeah, losing Chris Paul, losing Willie Lampkin, that one stings. I do want to point out this, though. Don't sleep on Sean Dolak. I think that if he can emerge as a really solid inside linebacker, I think there's something there. I think he needs to get a little stronger, add 5-10 pounds of solid muscle. But if you look at the big picture here, and you just kind of just relax a little bit, the Rams overall, their offensive line is going to be fine. And, yeah, as long as Matthew Stafford and Alec Jackson are healthy, I don't think we're going to be really talking about this for very many other episodes. It's just it's the topic of conversation right now because you are in kind of the dog days, that little dead period before the season really begins. But now you guys are all caught up. You know everything you need to know about your Ramley heading into this week 1 on September 7th. So we're going to continue to break this one down, but that is what is going on. And just a reminder that it's another big moment for Locked On. College football fans, Locked On and Fire TV present College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation alongside 2-time AP Coach of the Year Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts. A college football preview only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, only on Fire TV. But that's going to do it for the episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. We'll be with you tomorrow. Stay tuned for the Squad Show. Myself, Gavin Carlson, and my man, Big Brock, Michael Brockers, rock with us as always. But until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.